guys, Caleb Kosterky here, and we're doing another Proven Progression episode. This will be episode 3 in my pro level riding tip series. For this pro tip, I'm going to go over wheelie mastery. I'm going to talk about how to hold a long wheelie, how to turn in a wheelie, how to do side hill wheelies, and also one-handed wheelies. Let's head into the riding zone and start working on this. Isaac and I just got into the zone and I found a relatively good wheelie practice hill here. One of the cool things about wheelies is that you don't really need a dedicated practice spot like a lot of other maneuvers. You can kind of just practice wheelies all day long everywhere you ride. I know a lot of people are going to think wheelies are just for show and they're just a cool thing that you do. But my personal belief is that learning to control your wheelies actually gives you a lot of sled control and becomes very useful even in tech situations. It allows you to carry more momentum because you can control where your sled's going in a wheelie rather than chopping the throttle and setting the front end back down. So I don't think it's ever a waste to work on sled control, regardless of what that is. Before we get into technique, I am going to talk about sled setup a little bit. I'm always hesitant to talk about how to make a sled wheelie because I feel like guys often kind of ruin their sled setup and make their sled wheelie too much, and then they can't climb steep stuff in the trees. But I do want to go over it just so you have an understanding of it. You know, this is a pro level riding tip, so I expect you kind of understand the basics of how a sled works. But in case you don't, we'll go over it once more. Rear track shock affects wheeling a lot. The stiffer it is, the less that shock's going to compress and the less your sled's going to wheelie. The stiffer the front track shock is, the more your sled's going to wheelie. The softer it is, the more that attack angle is going to collapse and the less it's going to wheelie. Limiter strap. I've never adjusted a limiter strap, to be honest. I always leave it in the stock position. Another thing to mention is track length. Obviously, shorter sleds are going to wheelie a lot more, especially with the chaos geometry. This sled is a 146, so it's going to wheelie in all snow conditions. Sometimes a 146 is actually harder to wheelie when it's deep because it just trenches in, and then the 155 has the advantage. So don't buy a short sled just because you want it to wheelie. Just kind of try to understand what sleds are good in what conditions. Bone stock 155 boost with a 325 track wheelies like crazy. So you know, you don't have to have a 146 to wheelie a bunch, but spring snow like this, the 146 is definitely going to help us out. Deep snow, stick with the boost, a 155 boost. Again, you don't need a turbo to do wheelies, but more power obviously is going to keep the front up a little bit more. So just things to keep in mind. It doesn't matter what sled you ride, you can get it to wheelie and you can work on your wheelies. Just know what sleds are good for what. So most of us are running short tunnels these days. You know, the Matrix Slash comes with a short tunnel. That's what I'm talking about. They are phenomenal. I would never want to ride a sled with a long tunnel, but when you're practicing wheelies, it's actually a little bit of a disadvantage. When you get to a vertical point with a short tunnel, there's nothing stopping that from flipping over backwards. So you want to make sure that you have a little bit of angle. You don't actually want your sled stood up all the way vertical unless you have a long tunnel, you know, that sticks way out here. Then you have that wheelie bar and it's going to be a lot harder to flip it over on yourself. So body positioning is going to be back on the sled. To initiate it, we're going to grab a little brake, lean forward, give it throttle, release the brake, pull back and kind of squat down. And doing all of that at the same time is going to bring the front up really easy. You probably already know that. Again, this is a pro level riding tip. You guys should be pretty dialed on this basic stuff. Where it gets a little trickier is once you get it stood up, you want to give it a throttle chop like almost right away. So get it initiated, get the front stood up, chop the throttle, and then get back into it. And that's going to set your track into the snowpack and it's going to start chewing. The key to holding long wheelies isn't momentum and it's not being wide open. It's getting good traction in the snowpack, getting the sled at the right angle, and then just letting it kind of chew around at that angle, keeping the front up because it's getting traction in the snowpack. And having it trench down a little bit kind of locks you into the snowpack, and it makes it so it's really easy to control the sled at that point. Once that wheelie is initiated, you actually want to get a little bit of bend in your arms and get the bars a little bit closer to your chest. That way, if you feel the front start dropping a little bit, you can throw your body weight back and get it to come back up. You can't just ride with your arms stretched out and your ass way back here the whole time during a wheelie to have control doing it. If you've ever seen moto guys hold a wheelie to a rhythm section, it's really sweet how they kind of let their back tire drop into the hole and come out and drop into the hole. You can kind of do the same thing on a sled, but you really have to predict or like kind of guess what the sled's going to do before it actually happens. Right here, I have this little hump. If I'm holding a wheelie through this hump, I'm going to have to pull on the bars a little bit less during the steep section. And then as soon as it starts going flat right here, I'm going to have to pull on the bars a lot harder. So I kind of have to plan for that and just know in my head, like, okay, get my body weight forward as I'm coming up the hump, and then throw my body weight way back at the top of the hump. And then when I get to the next hump, kind of the same thing. You kind of lose your control of your wheelie for a split second, but as long as your skis don't touch, you're good to go and it's still going to look cool. Once you can get your sled in a wheelie and hold that wheelie indefinitely, you're ready to start working on turning in a wheelie. So you should be able to do a couple different things. You should be able to do like a U-turn in a wheelie without ever putting the skis down. And you should be able to do kind of S-turn things, something like this. And then as you get better, you should be able to do like basically a full circle. So it'll take a lot of practice to get this down, but once you can hold wheelies like this, you can do a lot of cool things like zigzag around trees, turn out in steep climbs, and I don't know, look like a badass, I guess. When we think about turning snowmobiles, we often think about skis and what they're doing. We think about counter steering or carving. Well, when you're in a wheelie, you obviously don't have your skis on the ground, so the skis don't matter at all. What matters is what you're doing with your hips and how much weight you're putting on each foot on the running board. You almost have to think about pushing through the running board to tip the sled one way or the other to get it to chew the way you want it to chew. Whichever way the track is oriented in the snowpack and spinning is how the sled's going to maneuver. So if we go back to my little drawing here, if you want to do, let's say, a U-turn like this, you're going to have to take the orientation of your sled from chewing straight to chewing this direction, and then it's going to chew around in that U-turn. If I know that I only want to turn one direction during my wheelie, sometimes I'll go to a wrong foot forward position, and that seems to help really exaggerate how tight I can turn the sled. But it's all going to depend on your line and what you want to do, whether you can go to that wrong foot forward position or whether you should just stay neutral. I can even do like hop overs and go from wrong foot forward on one side to wrong foot forward on the other side during a wheelie. I wouldn't say that's a very practical maneuver, but sometimes it's fun. The key that I figured out for one-footed wheelies is to initiate the wheelie leaning over the center of the sled, like basically getting my torso over the gas tank, getting it stood up, and then kind of going to this back seat squatted position like so, and just kind of sitting there and hanging out and letting it chew. The issue that I had when I was trying to figure this out, though, is that I was trying to get the sled in a wheelie with my weight way over here, and the sled would just tip over on its side right away. So you can't really shift your weight over until after the sled is vertical or near vertical and chewing in the snowpack. Next thing we're talking about is doing wheelie side hills. I'm going to continue to use this blank canvas as my whiteboard so I can kind of walk through this with you guys. So you're going to initiate a wheelie side hill the same way you would doing a one-footed wheelie or wrong foot forward wheelie like I talked about earlier. And then what it really comes down to is the angle that you pick on the hillside. If you need more ski lift and you have too much momentum, you want to turn the sled uphill more in your side hill, kind of like so, picking a up angle. And then as you start trenching out, let's say I'm trenching out right here, then I'm going to orient my sled across the hill or downhill a little bit and let it chew, let it chew. If it feels like I'm getting too much momentum or my track starts coming out of the snowpack, then I'm going to turn it back uphill and let it chew. So you're using the angle of the hillside to assist you in keeping your front end up. The last part of wheelie mastery is learning to wheelie one-handed. So what we're gonna do for a one-handed wheelie is get the front end up, get it chewing, and then we're going to counter steer all the way with the throttle towards us. We're gonna hook really hard on the bars with our hand, like a hook grip like this, and lean back. We're gonna leave this arm extended for the whole thing and basically just sit back over the tunnel and control our wheelie with throttle control and then leaning one way or the other, controlling which way we're turning. So kind of the key here is to not let go with your left hand until this arm is outstretched completely and you're in this position. You're just not strong enough. Like I'm not strong enough to do a one-handed wheelie with this arm bent. Has to be outstretched, and you kind of have to be just chilling with your hips back here. And then the last part of the one-handed wheelie is deciding what to do with your free hand. I often, throw up some gang signs. You can do the lazy arm behind you. You just have to make sure you really flick your wrist back and get this hand, way back there. I'm not very good at that, but you see guys like Brett Turcotte do it, and it looks super good. So just have to figure out your own style and what works for you. This sums up wheelie mastery. This is episode 3 out of my pro level riding tip series. Be sure to tune in for the next one. We're going to be going over next generation hopovers. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and share it on your Instagram or Facebook page, and be sure to tune in for the next one.